That's right. I'm a slow learner. Start again. Morning, councillors, staff, members of the public. Welcome you to this Policy Committee PP 22-5. We have apologies from Councillor Gray, Councillor Murray Benge. Murray Granger is away on leave, and we have lateness for Kevin Marsh. Can I have a move for those, please? Councillor Denia, Councillor Daly, I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, no. We have no late items. Are there any declarations of interest? It would appear not. We have no public excluded items, and we have no request for a public forum. So we'll move straight into a presentation from Reuben Gardner tonight. Good to see you again, who has two colleagues with him, Nikki Green and Julie Bevan. Just in support. We're not that hard to deal with that you need to bring supporters, Reuben, but welcome. And this is a presentation that has been given a couple of times that I've seen, and I thought it was really worthwhile for our councillors to have a look at it and what really is behind the freshwater policy statements that are coming through. So Reuben, the floor is yours, and thank you very much.
Tēnā koe me weba me koutou no hoki o te kaunihira nei, mā ngā kuria whareki o Tamarākau, tēnei hoki te me ki a koutou. The Western Bay of Plenty District Councillor nei Rangamahi. My name is Reuben Gardner. I'm a senior planner with the Bay of Plenty Regional Council, and my particular bent in this line of work is supporting tangata whenua engagement and participation in implementing the National Policy Statement for Freshwater Management 2020. So kia ora, and thank you for your time, I appreciate it. I'm gonna go straight into the slides. Okay, so the discourse in the community around freshwater is wide and diverse, but I'm guessing many of you would have heard of the rapid changes we're making in freshwater management in the years to come. Today is really around some of those key terminologies and whakaaro that you might have, that you might be aware of coming through in the community discourse around freshwater, mainly around the changes for freshwater policy work, where this work influences national implementation, how we're going to be working along tangata whenua at a regional level, and any question following up. I'm a lax presenter, so if there are questions during the presentation, feel free to ask, or we can wait till later on. So ngā I'll just go straight into it. Okay, so there's a lot going on in the environmental policy space at a national and a regional level, and we all know that freshwater is the heart of some of that stuff. So what the National Policy Statement for Freshwater Management 2020 just requires a higher level of consideration for our freshwater and how that filters down our decision making. So at a higher level, the National Policy Statement requires a tighter time frame for the whole region. Nationally, there's a deadline of December 2024 for our policy to be notified, but our council is being a lot more proactive and have asked for that to be moved forward a few months to July 2024 to give us that buffer. Te mana o te wai framework is a critical part of what we're doing and how we support our community, including tangata whenua, to give meaning to that whakaaro, which also requires strengthening the involvement of tangata whenua and understanding that freshwater policy development is a spectrum, and across that spectrum are many opportunities for tangata whenua to have an involvement and have some determination over how things are going. But also the NPSFM 2020 it's a game changer for tangata whenua participation and how we manage our resources. And a good example of what the game changer is this last bullet point on the slide, this compulsory mahinga kai value. Planners in the room would understand what a compulsory value is in terms of freshwater planning, and in the context of what we're doing here, compulsory value is those things that must be protected. And what are those indicators and attributes that we develop in order to tell us that those things are working and our work is paying off? So Mahinga Kai value is a bit more than just the eel in the water or the resource being eaten. It's reflective of the tikanga that tangata whenua have around their Mahinga Kai resources, but we'll get into that a bit later on. Okay, so we have heard that term te mana o te wai. It's a flashy term. I am rather frank when I describe what this actually is, particularly to our tangata whenua communities. Essentially, it's a hierarchy of priority in terms of how we make decisions around our fresh water. The first consideration being the health and well-being of the water and those freshwater bodies. Second is the essential needs of people. And then anything outside of that in terms of development and culture, that's the third consideration. But a critical part of te mana o te wai are those 6 boxes at the bottom. Those 6 principles have to be manifest in our policy in order to reflect what we're doing for te mana o te wai. So you might think that, for example, 3 of them, mana whakahaere, manaakitanga and kaitiakitanga, they might seem to be a direct translation of the last 3 boxes, governance, stewardship, and care and respect, but they're actually not. They're separate and distinct principles that we have to manifest in how in our policy development. So at a high level, that is te mana o te wai. Any questions so far?
I think the critical thing that, and why I want, that this legislation was introduced in 2014 by Nick Smith, and it was clarified more recently to give it, particularly that slide that's up there now, that the focus of all these water reforms, the 3 waters, is the first principle is the health and well-being of water bodies and the freshwater ecosystems. That's what's driving a lot of where Taumata Arawai are saying, and this legislation's been around for a while. So it's just letting everybody know that this is really what's driving the background to fresh water and the unintended or the intended consequences for 3 waters, what you could discharge. So when we're looking at our discharge options, it is really, are we improving the health and well-being of water bodies and freshwater ecosystems? That's the first question we've got to answer. So thanks, Ruben.
Yeah, tēnā koe. So, next slide. I'll just make a point that this presentation and my line of work really does have that tangata whenua focus, but this is just one segment of a very substantial workload. So yeah, just thought I'd slot that in before I go any further. So the next part of the presentation, we really look about how and what we're doing to support regional implementation, particularly around where tangata whenua values are taken into account. And a game planners in the room would understand this slide in terms of the national objectives framework. I guess the key for this slide is that if you look at the blue boxes in the middle, the vision, the values, outcomes, and attributes, that's pretty straightforward. You know, the logic is there in terms of how we plan. But where the game changer is, particularly for now, is the emphasis that central government is placing on the role that mātauranga Māori and that relationship that tangata whenua have with their fresh water. And so it's around a greater diversity of values and knowledge, just so that we get a more well-rounded and holistic approach to how we manage the fresh water. I guess the highlighted example to explain this will be that Mahinga Kai compulsory value, which I'll get to later on. But if you look at the sequence of the national objective framework, we're currently going around the region, for example, and talking to tangata whenua around the visions and values that they have with those freshwater bodies that they have their relationship with. But the further you go along in that process, the more tangible the work needs to be. And so, yes, we do develop visions, values, and outcomes. But where council is truly partnering tangata whenua is supporting them, building capacity to develop methodologies to to structure their mātauranga Māori in a way that's effectively communicated within the planning spectrum. And it's really about, because the MPSFM not just requires us to understand and ask that question, how would you, tangata whenua, like to be involved in setting this work? We also must ask that question of what the role that tangata whenua would like to play once things are put into place. And what is the post-implementation role? So just be aware that while we are asking tangata whenua to put input into the implementation, we also need to find a space or get a sense of what role they want to play once things have happened.
Ruben, if I could just stop you there.
Yes.
The other thing that this council hopefully is aware of, or the council laws are aware of, Project Parori, which is being running at the Timanaya stream. Yeah, but that is a catchment, and our council and the regional council and the community have been involved in a pilot project here to demonstrate how this works. And you'd have to say it has been an extremely successful pilot, and just to, there's nothing to be afraid of in this. It's really focusing on that, how are we looking after the water in the catchment? And
I think you're right, Mayor Weber, and that project Parori is a good example of, because it's not only our freshwater bodies, our streams, our wetlands that are important, but it's those receiving environments, including our harbour. And my understanding of Project Parori is it gives a good line of sight between what happens on the land and how that's manifested in our receiving environments, particularly the harbour. So yeah, and again, the MPSFM requires us also to place a lot of emphasis on where that fresh water is going and the quality of fresh water in terms of how that supports a healthy receiving environment, whether it's wetlands, whether it's estuarine. So yeah, that is a very good point. Okay, so in terms of the role and the work that we have to do in terms of partnership with tangata whenua, this is a really substantial piece of work. And planners would understand that what would normally be given a 10-year time frame to be achieved, the government has given us a 4, now 3, now 2-year time frame to get this done. So the emphasis is on how, within the time and the resourcing available to us, do we achieve pretty much these bullet points. So the regional policy statement and how Te Manawatū will be implemented, how will that be implemented? We are working with tangata whenua across the region. We're also required to do it for each freshwater management unit, or FMU. We must develop the visions, outcomes and action plans to achieve these visions, which are realistic, but very aspirational, but very realistic. We have to develop, the development of attributes, indicators and tohunga for Mahinga Kai is a really critical part, because, and as I spoke at the Waiari advisory group, that Mahinga Kai value is actually a real game changer, because in my experience, it's the first time with tikanga Māori, it's more than just the eel in the water that the focus that Mahinga Kai looks at, but it's also what are those peripheral things around the eel that tangata whenua value that must be taken into account. And an example would be, for example, the migration of eels. If we were just to focus on the health of the eel in the water, then the ecological value will be sufficient. But what Mahinga Kai value is asking us to do is take into account the relationship that tangata whenua have with that resource. So that relationship doesn't just include the taking of the eel and consuming it. It also includes what are those conditions that are required for them to take it properly. For example, in Tūhoi, many of the eeling sites that they have, you can only take those eels using a specific set of traditional tools. And those traditional tools happen to be sourced within the forest, away from the lake or the water body they're taking it from. So some of those in Tūhoi have said, so if you're looking to protect our Mahinga Kai, how are you going to protect those species of subject that are critical for us in order to do this in the way that we naturally do it? That's just one example, but Mahinga Coastline asked us to look more than just the resource in the water. How can council take into account and make room for your way of life around that resource? So it's the way of life that, and to my understanding, we've never really had that chance to have that discussion in a meaningful sense with tangata whenua. So again, the NPSFM 2020 has given some game-changing moments for our work alongside tangata whenua.
Sorry, Ruben, Don.
Only a question when you were going to move on, but I just was wondering about the FMUs. How many FMUs are there in the Bay of Plenty? Or
13.
oh, okay. And is that likely to expand or get more, or is that pretty much in place now? Is that identified? It'll be what there is going forward. It won't intensify down, and it will grow, or no?
Oh, sorry.
I'm Nikki Green. We have 13 draft freshwater management units. They're subject to our engagement process next year, so they could change. But a lot of this work that Ruben is talking about can be set at an FMU or part of an FMU level. So if, for example, there were some very specific aspects of a vision that only applied to part of the Tauranga Harbour catchment, then that could be done, nested within the larger FMU.
Go.
Could you please just explain what you mean by an FMU? Is it a catchment area or is it greater than that?
The term FMU was a gift from central government and the NPSFM. I guess we take our cue from that in just being consistent with the definition that they have, but we oh, sorry, could you ask the question again? Sorry.
What is the FMU
what
stand for?
Yeah.
Oh, freshwater management unit.
And it's a what covers it? Is it like the Waiari catchment? It's wider than that. It's smaller than that.
You might as well stay there,
Can I press this back? Does that work? Thank you. I joined Ruben for the meeting because we thought there might be some wider questions about the program as a whole. For Western Bay, there would be Tauranga Moana catchment, Kaituna, Waihi Estuary catchment, Waitahanui, would all be freshwater management units as a whole at the moment. And the work that Ruben's outlining, the National Policy Statement asks us to do at least at a freshwater management unit level. So you might anticipate there would be a set of vision statements and outcomes for each of those set in our plan. Actually, the vision statement will be in the regional policy statement, so that would direct your district plans as well.
Grants.
So when the tangata whenua input, is this, obviously they're quite big freshwater management units. Would you need a cross iwi support for a vision statement?
Ideally, but I guess when we engage with tangata whenua, they ask us to look at their relationship in the scope of their rohe. And while they will probably, they do have relationships outside of their distinct rohe, the key message for us is to make sure that they're in the focus of whatever the FMU is. But yes, you do have those areas where they cross over. But again, if the question, it's the scope of the question we ask of tangata whenua. If we were to ask them about FMUs, yeah, you'd get those resistant kind of question. But if we scale it back to what are those areas that are special to them and get them to express what those values are, then it's up to us as council to work that into our structure around FMUs. We find that sometimes it can be a triggering question. And so if the focus on us is to make sure that we get those values in a meaningful way, then I guess my conversation with tangata whenua is scope to what the expectation is of the animal here.
Yes.
But then, like, if you look at, for example, you know, you've got the Pungakawa and you've got Waitahanui, many of those people are in the same boat. But if we were to ask them about within their rohe only, we will get those values for both of those key water features. So it can be a difficult conversation to manage, but I guess it's making sure that, again, our focus is on ensuring, irrespective of the water body, those values are expressed. Let that iwi politics side of it aside, because that's an ongoing discussion.
Thanks. James, you have a question?
Yeah, I wonder if you can describe how the Mahinga Kai value will interact with conservation values.
So good water conservation approaches should run in a herd. They should run together. So if you're looking at what the, you know, at our stream from an ecological point of view, and what tangata whenua is saying, if they're that separate, then there's something wrong. So the MPSFM already requires us to take a conservative approach. Where the Mahinga Kai value is a critical part in that, it'll help us set those limits based on what tangata whenua do with the resource. But certainly if cultural flows are very much distinctly different from what our ecological values are, then there's some work that needs to be done. But again, the Mahinga Kai value is more than is a bit beyond the kaitiakitanga side of Māori relationship. Our own RPS recognises that kaitiakitanga also has a consumptive nature to it, and so it's that's where you're going to have a different story through Mahinga Kai than you would say purely from an ecological point of view. But again, it's that question goes back to that triple hierarchy around te mano te wai, and where tangata whenua see themselves in that three-level hierarchy. But again, the Mahinga Kai value is distinct from the ecological value, is that there's a big injection of people into that value. And so, but if you were to get if a Mahinga Kai value and an ecological value is that skewed, then yeah, there needs to be some more discussion.
I think you've got to look at, this is where Project Barori comes in.
Yeah.
They seem to, you know, this is where consensus and having everybody at the table, you can actually land somewhere that meets all opportunities. So I think that's where, you know, Project Barori is, that maybe we need a presentation on how that's working from the different parties. I don't know if we can organise that, Rachel, but that's really the example that shows you it can be done.
So that does bring us to the Mahinga Coastline. So this, I mean, we are partnering with tangata whenua, but also co-designing the attributes that they're doing. So one thing we are acutely aware of is that while we're asking for tangata whenua to, and there's a lot of ground for them to input, their capacity needs still weigh heavily on how we work together. And so as a council, we really have been investing in boosting that capacity, because from a partnership point of view, it just makes sense. But also for many tangata whenua, this is the first time that they've had to articulate for effect in a planning situation, things that they inherently know or things that come as second nature to them. But getting them to think about what they know in the context of planning can be difficult, but that's where the payoff is in the end, because building capacity of tangata whenua, not just that input into what we're doing, but also giving them the context and demystifying the work that we as council do, so that we're more likely to get their willing full participation moving forward. And again, Mahinga Kai values is different from one group of tangata whenua to another. And the role of tangata whenua also, so if we're asking them to develop values, attributes and indicators, then we also, the logic question after that is what role would you like to play in terms of monitoring those things? And so the MPSFM requires us to at least entertain that question and in a meaningful way, get them to communicate that to us. But Mahinga Kai value, again, if there's one takeaway from this value is that what makes it distinct from any other value is the role that people play in it. And yeah.
Oh, great, yeah.
Ruben, on the previous slide, you talked about developing farm plans to incorporate and give effect to Te Manawa Toa. How do you anticipate the monitoring role taking place on farm? Will it be downstream results, or there will actually be some on farm? And will tangata whenua be taking monitoring processes on farm?
Well, again, once we get a sense of what role they want to play, but we're currently working on a project with a big group of Te Aroa Māori landowners, the Te Aroa primary sector, in order and getting them to engage with particularly Māori landowners on exactly that. Because it's not, it's Māori funds must also take into account and give effect to Te Mana Toa. But I guess, again, if you look at what the work that is going on now, for example, taking into account iwi and hapu management plans currently as they stand, I think what we should be looking at is making sure that irrespective of what, I just think that there's those conversations will have to happen, but I think that we need to make sure people are clear on what things are. Again, if under existing regime, iwi and hapu management plans aren't or are being taken into account, it shouldn't be too far of a cry to move that discussion on towards how farm plans should either incorporate or give effect.
Yeah,
I guess it's in. Oh, sorry.
I think getting back to the farm plans and that sort of thing, this is really just a heads up for us to understand the background to it. We would like to get through today's agenda.
Okay, so we've covered this.
Yep.
These next couple of slides really just emphasizes how important and on different levels of importance this kind of work is for tangata whenua. We're constantly reminded by Māori that they are a descendant of their environment, and therefore this is more than just business to them. For many Māori, their connection runs very, very, very deep, and therefore it can be a rather emotive discussion. So how you manage that discussion is based upon how you manage those expectations, I guess. And so similarly, the next slide just emphasizes how and what tangata whenua, how they currently articulate their relationship. Taonga species abundance, it pretty much says how do they experience the conditions of our environment at the moment. Many Māori and Kaitaki, they don't have a scientific background, but they'll tell you when the water's off, or they'll tell you when that species isn't right, or they'll tell you from their own experience, this isn't the right time to take that resource. So I guess how we take what's been said on this slide and how we incorporate it into tangible planning, that's the real challenge. And that, I guess this highlights also how articulate both council and tangata whenua have to be when they talk to each other, because how do you incorporate smell, taste and touch into a plan without having that dialogue? So I guess that's what this slide is there for, to be honest. I didn't put the slide in, so I'm talking to it, but I can see why someone put that in. Okay, so This is probably the most substantive engagement process that we've had as a council with tangata whenua. It's been going on for at least 3 years. And off the top of my head, we've probably had 250 engagements, with around 40 to 45 tangata whenua groups across the region. We are guided in that engagement through this thing called Te Hononga, the Confluence. It's our engagement plan that we've come up with, and it's a best practice approach based on some of our previous work with tangata whenua. It's been informed by submissions on previous plan changes, on co-governance documents, and a whole range of things. So what it is really just council's way of communicating to tangata whenua. Get it, we understand. We've picked up on your messages, and this is how we've done that. And so pretty much what it does is it offers a range of options for participation. Whilst not exhaustive, they're pretty substantial, and the majority of tangata whenua do support the interventions that we describe in here. So the next slide pretty much are some of those options, how we're engaging with tangata whenua. Again, kaitiaki reference groups, taiao hubs, collectors. So if you look at it, it's just a way of making that easier for tangata whenua, because they have finite time, finite resources. Many of them don't have staff. Many of them are just part-timers. So how can we, as and in light of being critical partners to tangata whenua, these are some of the ranges, these are some of the options that both ourselves and tangata whenua have come up with. And largely they've been taken up on. We are discussing, for example, with our co-governance groups, Te Maru Kaituna, but we are looking at options proposed by tangata whenua sub-regional hui. So I won't go through this list, but these aren't exhaustive, but these are reflective of pretty much how tangata whenua want to be engaged. Yeah. And okay, the next slide is mainly on our timeframes at a high level. Pretty tight timeframes. So we've done our pre-MPSFM discussions. In terms of the Kaupapa Maori participation side of things, our real intensive engagement phase has closed. Not closed, but it's transitioning to those that have expressed a willingness to work with us with developing programs. Those that may not have the capacity to get on board at this stage, we're making a place for you. Those that really aren't interested now, but we know would probably likely to come in, then we're communicating with them. And so we, at this stage, year 1, 2020, we've done the preliminary engagements. And now we're in the phase of developing those values and attributes. I won't say it's an easy task. You can only go as fast as they can work, but we're starting to get there. But the main thing is making sure that they feel comfortable with sharing what those values are so that we can work with them around developing good policy. But the timeframes are what they are. It's very tight. They were a gift from central government again, but we're up to the challenge. And I think we're at the last.
Right, thanks. Are there any other questions to Ruben? It appears not. Well, thanks for that presentation. I think to me, the critical slide is that the confluence for us, and this is why I suppose I've been asking you all to read Te Mana o Te Wai. If you read the Taumata Arawai legislation that's going through, Te Mana o Te Wai is embedded in that and giving effect to Te Mana o Te Wai. So when we apply for resource consents, whether that's drinking water, stormwater discharges, or wastewater discharges, you have to give effect to these Mahinga Kai requirements that sit in the catchments that we are part of. So this legislation was introduced by the Honourable Nick Smith, and this is the confluence where it's all coming together. So July 2024, how we all meet these standards, I think it's going to be incredibly difficult for New Zealand, but that's the legislation and that's what we have to work to. So thanks for helping fill in that for our councillors, because I think it's a gap that the regional council haven't taken to our, to this level, because you just see it as the Mahinga Coastline side dealing with Mana Whenua and Tangata Whenua. But we are equally impacted because we will be discharging into these waterways and we have to give effect to these freshwater management unit outcomes.
Thank you. I just note we have a district councils forum, the TLA Collaborative Freshwater Forum. So we meet with mainly your water service providers and sometimes your policy planners as well. And we've been talking through the whole policy process as it unfolds. And soon they're going to have quite a chunk of draft material from our region-wide chapters of our plans to start reviewing. And we'll be bringing to their attention the things that do affect your district most for their early feedback. Thank you.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, Nikki, but it's the gift from central government to regional government. You're about to give us the gift, and I think it's best that the councillors know the gift they're about to receive. And it's not one you can give back or re-gift. We have to implement on our side. So, yes, you've been talking to staff, but I think getting it at the political level for councillors to understand this is what's ahead of us in the next 3 years. It's a very different world we're heading into. We've been in it for 6 years now, since 2014. So we've had 6 years of it. And I think it's coming as a surprise to a lot of councils or councillors. Thank you. Let's see the end of that now. So, thanks again for coming in. Really appreciate that. Right, councillors. Now we move into the agenda proper, and we now go to page 8, which is the adoption of the Waste Management Assessment 2022. Are there any questions of Leighton and Matthew and his team? It would appear not. You've done it. You've stunned us to one shape, form, or another. However, I will move the recommendations 1, 2, 3, and 4, but I would like to add to 4, take out the full stop, and after, so it will read that the committee notes staff are to undertake a review of the Waste Management and Minimisation Plan 2017, and when doing so, contact other Bay of Plenty and Waikato councils to identify regional opportunities. So if I can have a second for that, second, Mark Dean. I'll speak to that. The reason for adding that on at the mayoral forum last week, and following on from some of the conversations we've had with Tauranga City and the regional council, it has been agreed that we need to look together at putting in a regional facility. There's already a fair amount of money from central government being given to Tauranga City to look at what they're doing. And so if there's some opportunities to put a regional facility together, then we've got to take the opportunity. So you want to speak to it?
Yeah, I'll speak in favour, but I just wanted to note that I think it's disappointing to read on page 53 that just over 48% of the material from Western Bay of Plenty that goes to landfill could have been recycled. So that's, as I say, quite disappointing, and if there's a lot of work to do in this space yet.
Any other speakers for or against? No, if not, I'll put those 4 recommendations. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, no. I declare that carried, and thank you. We now move to page 118, which is the proposed draft concept plan for Wilson Park, Waihi Beach. Katie, the floor is yours. Are there any questions of Katie? We've gone through this in pretty significant detail, but
Happy to take the report as read, but happy to answer any questions.
Alan, Councillor Sol.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'm be quite happy to just recommend that this goes through and move the motion as
Motions
read.
with the approve.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you. Do I have a second then? Councillor Denia. Is there any speakers for or against? If not, I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, no. I declare that carried. We now move to page 198, which is the deliberations on the rates relief policies. And we may have to go through this one at a time, but Tom, the floor is yours. Are there any questions that anybody might have of Tom? There's not. Well, I'm quite happy to move recommendations 1 to 4, which is the front end ones. Do I have a seconder for those, please? Councillor Denia, I'll put those. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, no. I declare that carried. We now move to recommendation 5, which is got some issues there. I'm looking for guidance, team. James.
Well, if you're looking for help, I would be happy to move item 5, 1 to 6, all option A's apart from issue 3, which is option C.
So you move up recommendation 5, issue 1.
Yeah, so they're all A's apart from issue 3, which is
Right.
option C.
Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Dean, I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. You've got.
Aye.
Thank you. We now go to then 6 was pretty self-explanatory. Do I have a move for that, please? Councillor Scrimger, Deputy Mayor, sorry. I'll second that. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, no. I declare that carried. Thank you very much. That means we're giving the Chief Executive some work to do. We now move to page 233, which is the adoption of the Te Puke Mcadoo. I hope you're getting enough exercise here, Katie. You're not going to cover this one off?
207. So we've got the 207 first.
207. Oh, sorry.
So I've got Cheryl and Kerry.
Cheryl and Kerry, sorry. Are there any questions of Cheryl and Kerry on the adoption of the curbside rubbish and recycling service policy 2022?
There's a correction. Somehow the word apply has been lopped off the last sentence in section 4.3. So it's kind of critical, I guess. So if you can make sure that's included.
Sorry. Is that in the recommendations or in the body of the report?
That's in the actual policy.
Oh, right. You captured that. All right, thank you. With that change, are you quite happy to move the recommendations there?
Yes, I am.
Councillor Denia, seconder, please. Councillor Dean, I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, no. Carried. Thank you. We now move to, sorry, this time, Katie, the adoption of the Te Puke Mcadoo Reserve Management Plan. Are there any questions of Katie on this?
We did do Ross and Hart. Yeah, we've done-
Yes, yeah.
Who's second?
James Denyer, Alan Soul and James Denyer, yes,
Sol and Dina, yeah.
yes. Sorry, so there's no questions of Katie on this? Do I have a mover and a seconder then for it, please? Councillor Daly. So we're going to adopt. And then all of the options, we're going through the issue 2. All of the.
So I wondered if you want to consider recommendation 1 to 3 and then move through 4 one by one.
Right, thank you. So we'll do 1 to 3. Move councillor Daly, seconded myself. I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, no. And then 4. We're going to go through this.
So 4 adopts or does not adopt, sir.
Yeah, but what?
Sorry, there's only one option for
Right.
issue 1.
So that's the one you want to move, councillor Daly?
Yeah.
The,
Okay, so
233 in the agenda.
So issue 1 is around our proposed district-wide policies for shade accessibility
Yes.
and play equipment. Just the one practicable option for this to confirm these new policies in the review.
right. Move councillor Daly, seconded councillor Scrimger. 1A. I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, no. Declared carried. We now go over the page to issue 5.
So issue 2 relates to our draft concept plan for the dog exercise area at Lawrence Oliver Park.
Yes.
Okay.
2B. Councillor Scrimger. I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. The next one, issue 6. Issue 3.
Issue 3, Midway Park.
Yeah. We did all that under option 4. 3A. Again, Scrimger. I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, no. Then issue 6, which is the Pongakoa Heritage House. Option. Yeah, I thought we'd moved all these on the way through.
There's a few.
Spencer Avenue. 4A. Councillor Thwaites, I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye.
Now we're
Issue 6, there is no 5. There really.
Oh,
Issue.
no, it goes 6.
Yeah.
It goes 6 and then issue 5.
Oh, sorry, I'm all over the place, but it's okay. So it's the Pongakoa Heritage House, option.
Wetlands, have you done?
Sorry, it is
Sorry,
slightly
it's-
confusing.
Apologies,
So we've
it's not
got
now
issues 1, 2, 3, and 4. We now need to do 6. And then we'll move back to 5. Sorry, so
Okay.
issue 6 relates to Pongakoa Heritage House, and there are 2 options.
Moving a second to there. Councillor Sol, Councillor Scrimger, I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. I'm sure you worked out whether it's 6A or 6B. Right, thank you.
Yeah.
Now we go back to issue 5, which is the
Yes.
Pongakoa wetlands. 5A, councillor Daly, councillor Dean. I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, no. I declare that carried. Issue 6, which is the Pongakoa domain.
So issue 7 now, your worship, Pongakoa tennis courts.
On line 6.
I'm following the run sheet I was given.
I'm following the report I was given.
Yeah, the numbering of the resolutions is one out with the issue.
Do apologise.
Sorry.
Needed to make my last policy committee memorable. So issue 7,
Well,
Pongakoa tennis
you're doing
courts.
well so far. So what are we doing now?
You're
Number
on,
6.
you're on, Resolution 6, which relates to issue 7.
Pongakawa domain. Right, we're back on track again. Councillor Scrimge.
Could I ask a question, in terms of the recommendation to? Sorry, just a question in relation to the recommendation to refer this to the annual plan 23-24. Bringing it forward doesn't seem as if it will be able, would take effect then anyway. So it would be left with the status quo, was my understanding of reading this. Have I understood that correctly?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So we already have funding
Tagged in place.
Yeah, tagged in the long-term plan, I believe for 23, 24, 24, 25, so 2 separate years. And bringing it forth for consideration to the next annual plan process will make that funding available sooner.
It will.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, if they decide to.
If they want, yeah.
So
Okay.
do you want to change the wording of the recommendation?
Well, I was concerned about impacts on this year's annual plan, but if that's not going to happen, then I'd be happy to move option A.
Right, thank you. Seconder, councillor Denia. I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. There we're on.
Be happy,
Just for Kawi Reserve and the Mcadoo Sports Ground.
be happy to move option A. It seems
Option
the
A,
only
councillor.
sensible one. It's not practical.
Deputy Mayor Scrimger, Thwaites. I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, no. I declare that carried. We now go to issue 9, which is the Jubilee Park Jameson Oval.
Option A.
Option A, seconded.
Could I have a comment first somewhere? I can't find the page just now, but there was, when I was reading this last night, yeah, but in relation to it sort of infers that the park is going to be renamed. I think it would be better to say, if it said consider renaming the park rather than take it as a foregone conclusion. It says agree to a review and renaming of the site. If it just had the word possible renaming in front of the word renaming, I think it would be clearer that all options were on the table.
Through you, Mr. Chair, my version says renaming of the site to be considered as part of the work program. So perhaps.
All right,
Is that-
yeah, okay,
You're comfortable with it as it is?
yeah, all right,
Thank you. So that's option 9A,
yes.
right? Councillor Daly, Deputy Mayor Scrimger, I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. We now go to issue 10, which is the archaeological considerations. Councillor Dean. I'll second that. I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Now we go to issue 11, which is the closed section of Spencer Avenue, Mcadoo. 11A.
Yeah, I'm happy to second that, on the understanding that it will be reviewed, but I'd be reluctant to see a huge amount of work put into this. As it comes up in other places that there are a variety of views on all sorts of topics. And I think it needs to be, obviously there needs to be some consultation, because there are people in the community who are very, very keen to have this reopen. But I think at this stage, reality, some consultation and a desktop exercise to discuss the worth of this project would be sufficient. With those comments, I'm happy to, support it.
Yeah, I'll speak in support of it as well as a mover. It does respond to the submissions received during the submission process. I agree with Councillor Scrimger that this possibly will open a can of worms and there'll be mixed views on it, but at least we've done our done well by the submissions, I think.
I suppose, Mr. Watson, you're hearing the comments there, and is there an opportunity for some consultation, or is this going to happen if we move this recommendation?
Let's put a review on the.
Yes.
I might direct that to Gary if I could. Yes. So in terms of opening the Spencer Avenue Road through. So I think a number of the councillors are aware there's been a history of backwards and forwards on that. It is a public road, but there are some disadvantages with opening it as well. So I would have thought we'd want to go through a consultation process before we opened it up.
No, great. Okay, so the understanding that there will be a consultation process that will follow on from this. So with that, I'll put that recommendation. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, no. I declare that carried. We now go to recommendation 11, which is in reference to the costs. Move in a second for that, please. It's pretty straightforward. It's just putting it to the annual plan for consideration. Right, I'll second it so we can move on today. I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. And then 12 is another thing we have to do, which is get the chief executive. I'm going to remove that. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Deputy Mayor Scrimgeour, I'll put that. And also recommendation 13, that the chief executive is required to make the editorial changes. I'll move that. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Denia, I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, no, carried. And that's the end of that. We now go on to something which hopefully we've got correct here, which is the adoption of the seal extension prioritisation policy and council maintenance of previously unnamed roads policy and revocation of the Maori roadways policy. It's a well-written book. Thank you very much, Emily. Are there any questions of Emily on this? It's on page 613 in your iPads. If you want a hard copy, it's stacked over here. That's the hard copy for today. So we've got this, again, recommendations 1 to 4, which is receipt and what it relates to, and that the policy committee revokes or does not revoke. I'm quite happy to move 1 to 4 that we revoke the Maori roadways policy. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Dean. I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, no. I declare that carried. These recommendation 5 that the policy committee adopts the council maintenance of previously unnamed. This goes on issue 1 or issue 2 or both of them. Right. Do I have a seconder for that, please? Councillor Thwaites. I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, no, carried. Then we go down to recommendation 6, which is the seal extension prioritisation policy. The recommendations there. Issue 1, it's option A. Issue 2. A and A. And the editorial changes, I mean, clause 7.1 to read, which follows through. All right. And then add a definition for landowners. And amend the policy criteria of clause 7.1 for clarity to read. And then there's policy 7 that the policy notes the seal extension priority policy updated priority list will be considered, will not be considered. Sorry, will be considered. And then recommendation A that the policy committee directs the chief executive to prepare a discussion. You're moving all of those for those. Seconded, Deputy Mayor. I'll put that all the. Certainly.
Imminently sensible and appropriate
that we have this policy. Given came through in discussions or comment on yours or otherwise, have a policy in place so that people can't have expectations of jumping up or down the list.
Right, look, thanks for that. I speak in support of the motion. And after 12 years, it's good to see we've finally got some common sense in our policy. It's still a bit wordy in the front end. So the next 12 years, Emily, you might want to try and consolidate that down. But if there's no more speakers, I'd
like to apply for you.
Yes, I support this policy. However, after driving over some of our gravel roads recently after some heavy rain, I think there may have been a criteria that may need to be included in the future with regard to washouts, susceptibility to washouts down the sides of some of these roads. And I know we didn't discuss that during this policy rejig, but it will become more of an issue in the future with the increasing propensity for heavier stormwater flows.
Councillor Denny, your right of reply.
I was going to say it's been a long journey and I'm glad we're just about there. So
Thank you. I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, no, carried. We now move to page 693, which is the council's role in housing, which is a policy review, and Jodie's coming up to man the ship on this. Are there any questions of staff? We haven't any options in this. You haven't tested me.
No. That was my option. It's just reflecting.
Just to highlight, this is basically a policy position. This is really stating where we'll look. The in the report, you'll see any specific application to apply the policy will have to come back to the council for approval. So my only question was in recommendation 2, whilst the policy may be of low significance, any application will be of high significance, I would have thought. So I don't know, we haven't captured that in the policy, but you may wish to comment.
Morena, Chair Gary and elected members. Yes, through you, Mr. Chair, in response to your question, any proposal that we have, we would assess against our significance and engagement policy and bring that back to you with our assessment that you then choose to consider alongside the proposal.
Right.
And when you're making your decision, you always check back against the significance and engagement policy. Yeah.
So I just asked councillors, are you comfortable that it's inherent in the policy, that it's not in because the actual policy is of low significance, but the impact will be of high? So you're comfortable with that wording? Right. Okay. Councillor Henry, you have a question.
Yes, I totally agree with what you just said, Mayor Gary, and it will be of high significance when it actually comes to play, but I'd like to fully support this policy. I think it's a right place, a right move to be heading it, that the council takes responsibility for our well-being in our Rohe district.
Right, thank you. Were you moving that by any chance, or?
Yes.
Right, thanks. Seconded by councillor Dean, sorry, a question, sorry, before we put it in.
I had a question about number recommendation 5E, and it says council will ensure projects generate a return back to council that covers project costs at a minimum. I'm just wondering if that's a little bit tightly worded in that you might want a bit of leeway in you know, some projects might make a bit and some bits lose, and the time of return makes it hard to measure that anyway. So I just wonder if that's too tightly worded.
Jodie or Emily, any comment on that?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. I think that is a good point in terms of the timeframes that we might look at for that return back to council. I believe that you've had conversations with our chief executive around the use of patient capital, which is where we can invest in something and have a return coming back to council, but that may be over quite a long time frame. I think at this point in time, I do believe this is quite a good investment principle to keep in here with the wording there as it stands, as long as we're clear around what that time frame for, I guess, the payback period might be. And that comes down to the proposal. So when we bring the proposals to you, we can then be looking at, what sort of time frame we might be discussing to get that return back into council. But I think it does set a good parameter for what we're trying to achieve here. And really, this is about investment in, not granting out. So, yeah, I guess that's what I would say in relation to that investment principle. But happy if you would like to make it a bit more flexible.
I just wonder if you're creating a rod thrown back and trying to calculate the investment return in a very complex and protracted time frame, and whether that's just going to make things difficult for you. But if you're happy.
Well, I think, Don, you've got a question.
Yeah, well, I'm actually happy to have it there, and I think it is a good principle to retain, given our performance of pensioner housing for the last numerous years. We actually haven't met that criteria, so there is a little bit of slippage there, but I believe it should be front-ended at the front, that all options are considered going forward, that they do cover the cost, and to minimise that cross-subsidisation debate that goes on from time to time.
Councillor Henry has moved. I'm quite happy to second.
Sorry, Anne's got her hand up again.
Oh, Anne, sorry, you got your hand up again?
Oh, yeah, well, I guess I can use the right of reply there, but
Oh, no, sorry. You can't use your right of reply. We haven't got a seconder.
okay. Well, I just want to talk on that point, because I think it's extremely vital that timing option is actually there, because I think that's what our ratepayers and community will be looking for. How long are these things going to take?
Well, I think seconded Councillor Dean. And in speaking of support of the motion, I am with Councillor Thwaites here that project costs at a minimum, that has always been what was supposed to have been the situation in the past. And for all sorts of reasons, that's what this policy is trying to just cement in place. We do really want to, these have to cover their costs, or we'll end up building houses and losing our shirts. I think that the assurance we have from staff is that each project will come back and it'll be evaluated against those criteria, which are many, but you'll make a decision on an as a case by case basis. So I support what we've got in here. Are there any other speakers for or against? Councillor Daly?
Just clarification, we moved 1 to 7?
Yes, the whole lot.
Okay. Yes, I'm in support of this. I think this transitions well from when we initially developed our housing action plan in 2017, and we decided we want to take an aspirational approach. This has really stepped our game up considerably with what we're proposing here. I think the elder housing review did definitely was done on the basis that costs would be covered. I see point 6 is we're approving in principle to consideration of better off funding used to deliver specific housing outcomes for local communities. We know that this is a controversial subject in some ways because of where the better off funding is coming from. So after talking to some people in the community, I think there is support for this initiative, although there will be others who maybe question this. But overall, I think we're in the right space. Thank you.
Councillor Henry, did you want to use your right of reply? Oh, sorry, we've got Councillor Sol before you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, I support this. I think it's really great that we have now got a policy where we can actually not just look that we have a policy, but something that staff can and council can actively work on for helping people with housing. The guidelines are great, and I just totally support it. It's a real winner, I think, for us. But again, as you commented earlier, we have to be careful not to lose our shirts, and that's really important in that one clause. Thank you, sir.
Councillor Henry, you have a right to reply if you wish to use it.
I'm just say congratulations to the staff, and it's been going on a long time since Healthy Homes work that was done out in Te Puke. And yes, we do need to be prudent. We do need to be watching our spending, but I think in the long run, it'll be a huge benefit for our district and the people who are currently not got a roof over their head. If you don't have a roof over your head, you don't have the opportunity to have aspirational.
Thank you.
Yes.
I'll put the recommendations 1 to 7. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, no. I declare that carried. Thank you very much. We now move to the last item on the agenda, which is the information for receipt, which is the submission we put into the regional council. I'll quite happy to move that. If I have a seconder, thanks. Councillor Sol, I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, no. I declare that carried. And thank you for your significant contribution, Tom. I'll now declare the meeting closed.